The Devil Has Aces is the penultimate episode of Lioness Season 2, Episode 7, and has the impression of it. Once more, the show appears to be only waiting for a more significant waypoint, in this case the team's mission's brutal finish. Moving characters from point A to point B and making sure the audience understands why, the episode is primarily explanatory and hits a number of story elements that fans will recognize. Although The Devil Has Aces provides an answer to the question of whether Joe survived the injuries that were revealed in Season 2, Episode 6, 2381, the focus shifts to getting ready for the final operation. Hey everyone, hope you're having a good day. Before going to the main topic, I want to say like this video and subscribe to the channel. While some of the cast members have scenes or lines to focus on, there isn't much that hasn't been seen before, and there isn't much to excite viewers about the final showdown other than wondering if the good guys will prevail. Lioness Season 2, Episode 7 is a lot like Season 2, Episode 3, Along Came a Spider. Both episodes serve primarily to set up the next part of the story, with Episode 3 focusing on Captain Josie Carrillo's training and Episode 7 tying up loose ends so the various story pieces can be consolidated into one final stand. However, both episodes suffer because they don't stand alone, aside from a few plot details and the revelation of Joe's fate, which isn't particularly surprising. Viewers don't take away much from what occurs here. Taylor Sheridan opens Episode 7 with a long conversation between Byron Westfield and Secretary Edwin Mullins, who is actually Morgan Freeman, delivering two different monologues, one criticizing the state of modern journalism and the other discussing 9/11 and the lack of modern leadership, even though he knows that the biggest question is whether or not Joe survived. This feels like Sheridan getting up on his soapbox for a few minutes, and it's not the most exciting way to get viewers back into the story. Fans don't see Joe alive and kicking, quite literally, after the credits have rolled, and that sets the tone for the remainder of the episode. The DEA agent Raymond Gutierrez is questioned, cleared, and possibly never seen again, while his informant Atsi is also questioned and moved out of the way. Nearly all of the supporting characters are brought to one place, so that they can all be in one place when the inevitable call comes. There is a briefing scene with Byron, Joe, and Caitlin Meade so that the audience can understand the operational details and stakes, but none of this jumps off the screen. The most exciting parts are the arguments that take place between Joe and her husband Neil regarding her going back to work, largely due to Zoe Saldana and Dave Annabelle's acting. Joe's claim that Neil can't guilt her into quitting is hypocritical given that she has been guilting other people throughout the season. Lioness interjects some intense flirting between Cruz and Josie in the middle of The Devil Has Aces, where Cruz brings Josie back to her North Carolina flat so that the other woman has a place to stay. They nearly kiss before the rest of the squad arrives at the door, and they are in the middle of making out when the phone rings. This is repetitive at best and doesn't contribute to the character's growth or the plot. Viewers will recall that Cruz was romantically involved with Aaliyah AMR. The idea of Cruz and Josie becoming friends was intriguing when Cruz was reintroduced in Lioness Season 2, Episode 4, 500 Children. They had something in common. They were both recruited into the Lioness program and had struggled with their respective missions. The audience was able to learn a little bit more about both characters through their developing friendship, but turning it into a romantic relationship doesn't provide any further insight into either character, and it's unlikely to since everything must be resolved in Episode 8. It's a plot twist that comes too late and serves no purpose. One could argue that the invasion of Cruz's flat by the rest of the QRF is an attempt at comic relief, as there are jokes about them all sharing a room and settling in somewhere that isn't theirs. However, none of this is particularly funny, and it seems like a way to give Bobby and company something to do until they are needed again. The actors, especially Thad Luckenbill as Kyle Sanford, who never stops acting like he's having a great time, and Kirk Acevedo as Gutierrez, are the best characters in Lioness Season 2, Episode 7. They are able to capture the moments when things get tense, but the main goal of penultimate episodes is to get viewers excited for the season finale, and The Devil Has Aces falls short in that regard. The audience wants to know if the team will win and if they will survive, but there is no other reason to care about the mission. Now that the plot's human trafficking component is done, the stakes described in that briefing are merely words. Even though it's a powerful moment when Neil literally slams down the phone after learning that his wife is going to Iraq. What's new or interesting this time? There's the tease that Joe might be willing to walk away after this mission, but it's hard to worry when Saldana is the show's star, and as Byron points out to Joe in the hospital, everyone other than her is replaceable. So how invested should viewers really be in the fates of any of the other characters when their own superiors view them that way? Additionally, aside from Josie's father, there is no face of the enemy for people to support. This episode could have filled in some gaps, but it never does. Sheridan has written some amazing work elsewhere, but Lioness Season 2, Episode 7 is another instance in which he is not quite at his best. While it may fulfill all the plot requirements, it lacks a genuine heart and struggles because it is attempting to polish a story that was never fully developed. We saw in the 6th episode of Lioness that Joe was seriously hurt, putting her in a critical condition, and that things didn't work out the way Joe and her team had hoped. First, there was a suicide bombing, and then the mission was compromised when Joe's team learned that Agent Gutierrez had an agent inside the Carrillo household. Caitlin, who had a close relationship with Joe, had to step in at the last minute and take charge of things, and she was furious when she realized that Joe had been hurt. Byron, on the other hand, was in a difficult situation and was unsure of how to handle it. He got into a heated argument with his co-workers in front of Edwin Mullins, and he told them that his team was not at fault. Edwin Mullins visited Byron Westfield at the start of Lioness Episode 7, which was likely one of the few occasions when Mullins visited Byron directly at home. Since the first season of Lioness, we have seen that all of these meetings take place in the Situation Room, and Byron is aware that if his superior comes to visit him at home, it is likely to convey a very important message. Edwin told Byron a very interesting story about how, when the 9/11 attacks occurred, the entire country looked to George Bush because no one knew what to do, and everyone wanted him to set a precedent, and he did just that. Edwin told Byron that while people were criticizing Bush's foreign policy, Bush's declaration that the United States of America would not remain silent and would respond with full force was what Mullins wanted from Byron, and he didn't want to take a defensive approach after what had happened with Joe and her team. Mullins gave Byron free rein, and he told him that he was free to do things as he wanted. We saw in the previous episode of Lioness that people were not happy with the entire suicide bombing incident. Byron told everybody that the team did what they felt was the best thing to do in that scenario, and he vociferously backed Joe. The media had also gotten a whiff of the entire affair, and Byron knew that he needed to do something before the situation got out of hand. Mullins told Byron that he was ready to take the fall if things didn't pan out the way they wanted them to. Byron contacted his team for a surgical strike of sorts, as he wanted to make a powerful statement to China, Iran, and other enemies of his country that the United States of America was not the only nation with vulnerable borders. In short, he wanted to attack the enemy on their own soil, and if it goes haywire, then it isn't all that difficult to understand the repercussions. If anyone had been following international news, then a similar incident took place between India and Pakistan after the 2019 Pulwama attack. Byron made it clear that he did not want Joe to be involved in the mission because he felt that she was not physically capable of leading things and that she was not feeling well emotionally either. The suicide bombing had completely rocked her, and she was desperate to get one chance to settle scores and get revenge. Brian could sense that Joe's involvement could ruin the entire situation and he couldn't let it happen again, so he personally asked Joe to rest and stay away. After being brought to a safe house, Caitlin and her team questioned Agent Gutierrez, asking him why he had betrayed them. Right from the start, Gutierrez made it clear that his actions were in the best interests of his country, telling Caitlin, Kyle, and the others that he had been trying to identify mafia bosses like Carrillo for years, knowing that simply seizing the drug consignment would not solve the problem. He told Kyle that the DEA had been trying to stop these cartels' activities for years, but they continued to operate because they had contacts in the right place. He also made it clear that there were politicians and law enforcement officials who assisted these cartels. Gutierrez felt that drastic measures were necessary to put an end to the viciousness. Caitlin came and spoke with him, asking him what the best course of action was. She told him that she still wanted him on the team, but that in order to do so, she needed to know where his loyalty lay and, more importantly, what his own intentions were. Caitlin told him that he had literally compromised the entire mission and that he should have informed Joe's team that he had his agent inside the house. Gutierrez assured him that he intended to never betray her, adding that they didn't have the luxury of taking a defensive stance. In Lioness Season 2, Episode 7, Josefina and Cruz bonded and ended up sharing a romantic moment. Cruz told Josefina not to blame herself for whatever had happened, telling her that she put herself between her and her father because she couldn't see him assaulting her. Cruz asked Josefina if her father had been like that from the beginning, and Josefina revealed that it was the first time he had done something like that. Cruz sympathized with her situation, telling her that she had dealt with abusive people all of her life and that she had encountered her mother's boyfriends and the effects they had on her. Just as Josefina and Cruz were about to share an intimate moment, the entire team showed up unexpectedly. Byron held a special meeting to decide their next course of action. Caitlin also called Joe to the meeting, as she wanted her to lead the mission. Byron wasn't sure about it, but Caitlin was adamant, as she knew that Joe was the best person to pull off such a job. As per the briefing, the U.S. intelligence had come across a Cantonese woman with a PhD in nuclear engineering, Deslashi Sun, who was closely working with an American-born Chinese man, Jun Hai-xiong. These two assets were suspected of moving some nuclear equipment via Diyarbakir Air Base and were headed to Iran. Their final destination was assumed to be the Isfahan nuclear facility. It could be assumed that these two agents were carrying some nuclear assets, and Byron wanted to take them down before they reached their destination. But you see, just like Joe, we were deprived of context. So, what Byron was trying to do was to take some sort of revenge on the Chinese and the Iranians, as he believed they were the ones behind the suicide bombings along the U.S. border. In short, he decided to attack the assets in Iran because he wanted to give them a taste of their own medicine. It would be interesting to see how things work out for Joe and her team, and more importantly, if she can make sure that she doesn't lose any team members in the process. The main topic of discussion in the meeting was how the U.S. agents would enter and exit Iran to eliminate the targets who would most likely be traveling by road. Joe told the committee that she had a pilot, Josefina, in her team who could take them into foreign territory. Now, Joe knew that by doing so, she was putting Josefina's life in jeopardy, but I think that all she had on her mind was to settle scores. She told Byron up front that she needed a win and that she was just not able to make peace with whatever had happened. Brian agreed, but with the stipulation that Joe wouldn't dare leave the base and oversee the mission from there only. You see, Joe was struggling with her own crisis. She was desperate to be a part of this covert mission. She knew that she would only feel satisfied when she was on the ground and among her team members. Joe's work took a toll not only on her but her family too. Neil was not happy with what she was doing. I believe that by the end of episode 7, the man had reached his breaking point. He had endured a lot, and now he wanted Joe to prioritize her family and her kids over everything else. Probably for the first time in a long time, Neil shouted at his wife and threw his phone in anger. Joe didn't know how to not care about her work, but I believe that Neil was not wrong on his part. He had been a good partner and a good father, but now Joe was really testing his patience. He was just done taking on all the responsibilities, and for once, he wanted Joe to be there for him and the kids. We will get to know in the subsequent episodes if Joe and her team are successful in their mission or not, but one thing is for sure, she will have to put in some effort and be there for her family if she doesn't want to lose her husband. Let us know in your comments. And stay tuned by subscribing our channel to get more updates like this. Thanks, everyone.